Want to welcome you to the Wednesday night Bible study for the STONECREST Church of Christ. We are always pleased that you take the time to join us on our Facebook page, our YouTube page, our website, or whatever panel you are able to receive this broadcast. Thank you so very, very much. I know it's been a minute since we've been able to conduct a Bible study ourselves, given that we have been rerunning some of the outstanding lectures from our Issachar conference that we had back in the month of May, and we appreciate your patience with that. We realize that some of you didn't have opportunity to be able to view the conference. We do want you to know that you can still go to IssacharConference.com, and all of those lectures are still on our YouTube page that you can connect to and see them individually, or all of them together. And thank you so much for your support of the conference. We want to look tonight at the beginning of the study of the book of Galatians. It is one of these outstanding books written by Paul in the New Testament. He's writing to defend his message of the gospel of Jesus Christ that had been challenged by some Judaizing teachers in his day. And we want to kind of give you an overview of the book, and then look at maybe the first two chapters and maybe even more in these weeks to come. Now, the intent of this study is actually going to be fourfold. You can see on the screen the intent and the scope of the study. I want to first of all give you an approach to biblical understanding in general. How are these books and the epistles and the Gospels, the book of Revelation, how are they to be read? I want to try to help you and giving you some principles as to how to read these New Testament documents. Then I want to spend tonight giving you the background and the purpose for the writing of the book of Galatians. And then I want to show you how the book has been read over the last 500-year history of Christianity, particularly in the Western world. And I want to take you all the way back to what historically was identified as the Reformation movement that was led by a gentleman by the name of Martin Luther, and how Luther read the book and how his influence of reading the book has influenced how the Western world of Christianity has read the book of Galatians for the last 500 years. And I want to evaluate that for you to show you how that Luther and his contemporaries were well intended, but they read the book not from the vantage point of Paul the writer, but rather from the vantage point of what the medieval church was going through at the time, more than 1,000 years after Paul had written the book and the beginning of Christianity, and how that reading has affected how people read the book of Galatians today. So we want to evaluate that. And then I want to give you an overview of Galatians 1 and 2, and then in the weeks to come, the remainder of the book. So that's what the study is intended to do. Now, the first thing I would have you to understand is what I call biblical understanding. And I want you to listen to me very carefully, because I want to emphasize, I've shared this with you before, but it's always necessary that we repeat certain things we learned a long time ago. Pardon me, please. That repetition is the first law of learning. And by that, I simply mean that the way we learn our ABCs, we didn't learn them the first time through. We kept repeating them and repeating them and repeating them, and then we memorized them. And now, watch this. They are so natural tools that we don't even have to think about our ABCs because they are so familiar to us and they're so ingrained in us. But it didn't start out that way. Back in kindergarten and in first grade, we learn our mathematical tables. We learn multiplication by repetition. And that's the same way we do when it comes to the study of any particular discipline. We just rehear it. That's what rehearse means, over and over and over again. So let me emphasize to you again that the Bible is culturally situated communication. Let me stop there for station identification. Uh, listen to what I just said and listen to the graphic on the screen. Watch the graphic on the screen. The Bible is culturally situated communication. Now, I've said to you three things just in that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 word statement. I've said to you that the Bible is written in a certain culture, and that culture is not Western culture. The culture is not the culture that you and I live in, or for that matter, familiar with. So the Bible is written in a culture that is unfamiliar to us, and that's why there is so much misunderstanding and misinterpretation of Scripture, because we fail to recognize and to realize it was not written in our culture. That's why stuff seems so different to us. In fact, sometimes so unbelievable to us. And it's all because it was written in another culture. It was written at another time. It was written in another setting. Their houses were different. Their clothes were different. And this is why we struggle at times when we read some of these laws, particularly in the Old Testament, how that a woman should not wear men's clothing. Well, we've got to understand that in the context of the culture and the time. And this is why we trip over certain passages of Scripture that has to be understood based upon the culture of the people who first received the communication. An eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth, a foot for a foot, a limb for a limb, and we read all of that, and if somebody hits you on one side of the face, turn the other cheek, and we read that from the vantage point of our culture rather than the culture in which it was written. And when you hear these statements like an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, see, we come to the conclusion is you take my eye, I take your eye. You take my tooth, I take your tooth. See, that's the way you and I, just reading it, would interpret it. When we understand a series of laws coming out of the Old Testament, particularly in the book of Leviticus and the book of Deuteronomy, there are a set of laws that are called lex talionis. And lex talionis is just a set of laws, much like laws in our criminal system. If people were reading these laws 2,000 years ago, they would have the same challenges that we have reading their laws from 2,000 years ago. Well, lex talionis is simply a set of laws that says, listen to this, the punishment ought to fit the crime. Huh? Say what? Yeah, that's all it means. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. It doesn't mean you go around gouging out somebody's eyes. It doesn't mean you go around making people snag a tooth, because to live life like that, watch this, everybody is going to be walking around sightless and toothless. Jesus will recite these laws in Matthew chapter 5. It had been said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, and then he would give a different set of laws. Listen, all he's saying is that's the law you live under. I come bringing you a different set of response to when people do evil against you. That's all he's saying. But you got to understand that set of laws coming out of the Old Testament, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. In other words, all the writer was trying to say then is that the punishment has to fit the crime. In fact, watch this. Uh, we had a law in our books in the 70s and the 80s. Uh, the law says, 3 strikes and you're out. And a whole lot of young African American men went to jail for life, uh, which was in other words, the punishment didn't fit the crime. They and recent presidents have pardoned men for those crimes done back in the 70s and the 80s because the punishment was too severe. Many of them were out there selling drugs uh, and marijuana in particular. Now we've legalized marijuana. Well, wait a minute, but you sent young uh, men to jail and women to jail for a small amount of marijuana that you can now buy over the counters in some stores. But they went to jail for 10, 15 years. And so, presidents have realized, and sometimes Congress has realized that the punishment didn't fit those crimes. All I'm saying is, and they have relaxed the punishment. Now, the Bible was written in a culture where you and I would be wise to try to understand what certain texts mean. I'm trying to set up for you the book of Galatians. uh, and so we have to understand something about the culture and the times in which the letters were written to churches in that day. Notice that the statement says that the Bible is culturally situated communication. Now, what do I mean by situation? When you're reading the Bible, you have to understand the situation, the setting of the recipients who receive the communication. You have to also understand something about the nature of the communication, which means this: most people in Bible time, in both testaments, the majority of the people, no, the overwhelming majority of the people didn't read. Come on, Doc. No, they didn't read because really there was no need for them to even to learn how to read. Why? Because of the culture. It wasn't a culture and a society and a time where it was absolutely necessary for you to be able to read. Now, you and I live in what I call, and I'm hesitant about using this word because it may communicate the wrong thing, a literate culture. It's not to say that the people are stupid. It's not to say that the people are ignorant. It's to say that there wasn't really a great need for people to know how to be able to read. And the reason why is because They lived in a culture and in a situation where the culture communication was oral, not textual, if you will. In other words, watch this. Kings couldn't read. This is why you had a set of men called scribes. There was also another man that were called amanuenses. In other words, today we would call them ghostwriters. In other words, they would write under uh, anonymity. I mean, you can actually find it in the New Testament where uh, an apostle would dictate what he wanted to send to the churches, and amanuensis would write what the apostle said to write. See, you and I live in a society where it is absolutely mandatory and necessary to be able, watch this, to read and to write. That's why we emphasize education to our kids so much. I remember as a kid growing up, I used to hear mama and them talk about the reading and writing and arithmetic. In other words, you gotta know how to count. You gotta know how to read, and you gotta know how to write. Listen, the reality. Talk to some of your great grandparents. Your grandparents may be too young, but uh, talk to your grandparents' parents, if you can go that far back. Many of them could not read. My own father could not read. He couldn't even write his name. He marked his name with an X. He couldn't write. He grew up in the 20s, the 1920s, and he couldn't read. He couldn't write. My mother could read, not well, but she could read. Now, this is what I'm trying to say to you. The Bible comes to us as culturally situated communication. It was written in another culture, it was written in another situation, and the communication was oral rather than literate or writing or textual. See, we call it orality versus textuality. This is why when you read the book of Revelation, it will say over and over again, blessed is he that readeth the words of the prophecy of this book. In other words, a certain blessing was attached to the person who could get up before the church and read the revelation and read the communication. And people would hear it. They didn't read it. You're sitting there at your home right now. Probably, hopefully, you have turned to the book of Galatians, which means this: you have your own copy. You have your personal copy. You got your own personal Bible with 66 books, probably even monogrammed. I mean, you've written your name on the cover. Well, that's wonderful. That's a blessing. But only the wealthy in Bible times had a copy of any scroll. Couldn't afford it. It's not like there were that many copies of it even around. And so you and I need to understand this kind of background as we open up any book of the Bible. So number one, the Bible is culturally situated communication. Now, let me explain additionally what I mean by that. On the screen, you see an image of one of the more uh, busier stretches of highways in the greater Atlanta area. Now, for those of us who have driven to downtown, either on I-20 or on the 285 or 85 or 75, we're familiar with this stretch highway. Uh, it's a stretch of highway that we call Spaghetti Junction. Even if you didn't know what it was called, you know where it is because you and I have gotten caught in all of the traffic at this section of highway called Spaghetti Junction, where Interstate 85, 285, 19, and 400, a little bit down the way, all of them merge at the same spot or the same area. How many times, if you're working in the downtown area, if you're going to the ballpark at Truist Park, particularly if you're going 285, um, how many times in the morning as you are commuting to and from work, have you heard the newscaster, or people on the TV, or people on the radio who are giving updated traffic reports tell you, if you can, avoid Spaghetti Junction? Now, for those of us who live in the greater Atlanta area and travel this strip of highway on a regular basis, watch this, no other explanation needs to be given. We know where Spaghetti Junction is because, watch this, it is culturally situated communication. So when we hear the guy in the helicopter reporting on the traffic jams, when we hear the morning newscasters giving the traffic report, we decide before we leave home, if we've got to go to downtown Atlanta, going to Truist Park, or going to a hospital on the north side of Atlanta, we're going to try to find an alternate route. And watch this. And we need no further explanation because we know where Spaghetti Junction is. Now, watch this. It's culturally situated, coded information if you travel regularly the highway, that stretch of highway. But let's say you're coming in from Tennessee. Let's say you're coming in from Alabama. Now, let's say you're coming in from another state and you're listening to the radio and you hear the announcer, the newscaster, the man or the woman in the helicopter talk about Spaghetti Junction. Avoid it if you can. You hear that, it means nothing to you. You don't understand the communication because, watch this, you don't live in the culture of greater Atlanta, and you don't understand about how that highway is situated. See, the same thing is true when it comes to the Bible. It's culturally situated communication. Now, if you watch the graphic now on the screen, I say the Bible is culturally situated communication, and as a result, because of poor hermeneutical skill and training, it is often misinterpreted, misapplied, and misunderstood. While we may appropriately feel that the Bible was written to us, we fail to understand that it was written for us. It was written to somebody else using their language, their culture, their history, their situation, their issues, their concerns, and transmit it orally rather than textually. So you and I are not the intended audience. And because we don't bring this skill set to the reading of the Bible, watch this. We impose our issues, our concerns, our situations on the biblical text. And in theology, we call that eisegesis, where one reads into the text what one wants to be there. In other words, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Because we don't understand the lex talionis laws, we conclude, man, you hit me, I'm going to hit you. You take out my eye, I'm going to take out your eye. You take off my ear, you're going to lose an ear. You see, that's the way we would interpret those passages because we don't understand that system of laws coming out of the Old Testament called lex talionis. So watch this. Because we don't understand the culture and the situation and the language and the concerns and the issues, we impose our own issues, our own concerns, our own situation on the biblical text. Watch this. Much like Luther and the medieval church did in October of 1517, as they were responding to the concerns of that day and read Galatians in light of those concerns. See, we do eisegesis rather than exegesis. Remember, I said that in eisegesis, you read into the text what you want to be there. Exegesis, you read out of the text what is in the text. See, and this is why we bring all of our issues in trying to find Bible for them. We try to find, well, you can't clap your hand because you can't find somebody in the Bible clapping their hand. That's our issue. That ain't their issues. You know, well, you can't have multiple song leaders because, they didn't have multiple song leaders. Well, why do you assume that our style of worship is similar to their style of worship? Everybody doesn't worship like we worship here in the Western world. You ought to travel the world and you ought to see how people in Africa and in Asia worship the same God. They're members of the same church that you and I are, but but uh, but they'll do it differently. When we take the Lord's Supper, we got some grape juice and we got a little wafer. You go to places in the world, they ain't got no grape juice. Yeah, they got the real wine. and and we have these little individual cups. There are places in the world where everybody would drink out the same cup because they're doing it in the context of their own culture. Now, you and I might have, watch this, issues and concerns with that, but these folk don't. We have a worship service that we start at 9:30, get out at 11:30. Look, they have a worship service where they may start at 9:30 and get out 3 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I know what you're saying at home. Don't know, Brother B. See, again, you and I are reading and worshiping based upon our culture and our situation. And so, and what we do, we end up dividing the church because we impose our issues and our concerns on the biblical text. And then we go and find a passage that looks like it supports our position. And we disregard the history and the context of that piece of writing in his own context and in his own history. And that's why Christianity is as divided as it is. And not just Christianity. Come on, let's be brutally honest here. Even the churches of Christ are as divisive as we could be, because we are looking for some kind of order of worship that the first century church did. Well, I can assure you, ain't nobody had no announcements. I can assure you, ain't nobody had no Sunday school. So, well, when does worship start? When does worship end? When can a lady say something? Oh boy, y'all sure got quiet on that one, didn't you? But see, again, we are imposing our culture, our issues, and our concern on the biblical text. Now, those issues may be very important to you, and I don't want to suggest to you that somehow they're not important to you. All I'm saying to you is this: you be careful how you try to push off your preferences on other people, in which those are not issues for them. Mm. Well, what is this to do with the book of Galatians? Let me say a thing or two here, and then we'll conclude for the night. Um, uh, Here's our problem. I want you to see the graphic that I have on the screen there. It's a graphic of the Wizard of Oz. Now, um, many of us watched this movie as a kid. Uh, I watched it as just a little bitty boy. It would come on every year, sometimes 2 and 3 times a year. And I was fascinated every time the movie came on. You and I think we know what the Wizard of Oz is all about. Uh, but I want you to watch the statement that I have on the screen. We watch movies much like we read the Bible. Okay, let me explain that. This is what I mean by that. We watch movies with little to no background of what the movie is all about. Watch this. We just start watching the movies. We don't know anything about the author. Now, you what or the writer? Okay, uh, some famous Scorsese or whoever uh, either produced the movie or wrote the movie. But what do we know about the author? Um, you'll remember the movie The Titanic. Oh, wonderful movie. Um, but it seeks to depict a real life situation with the launching of this cruise ship called the Titanic. Uh, it was said by its builder, not even God can sink the Titanic. Well, the only thing the Titanic ever did was sink. But then watch this. You said God couldn't sink it. And guess who made the iceberg? You got it, God. Now, because we knew something about the history of that ship, when we saw the movie, we at least had some frame of reference as to what the movie was all about. Now, When we watch the movie The Wizard of Oz, what do we know about the background? What do we know about the situation? Watch this. Most of us don't know anything about the background. We don't know anything about the situation. But come here. Something occasioned that movie. I mean, Hollywood made the movie based upon a book. Watch this. We watched the movie. Here's the problem. We didn't read the book. That's the way we treat the Bible. We just open up to the book of Galatians. We just start reading with little to no background about, watch this, significance of title. It's called Galatians. Well, who are the Galatians? Well, who wrote it? Who's the author? Why did he write it? Why did he write it to these people in this location? What was so important that when he opens up the letter in the first verse, he starts it out by saying, Paul, an apostle. In other words, he doesn't even say hi. He doesn't say hello. He says, Paul, an apostle, not of men, not from men. Can't you say good morning? Can't you say good afternoon? Can't you say, hey, how you doing? That's the way he opens up all of his other letters, by extending the greeting. Hey, how you doing? This is who's with me. That they send their watch it. None of that in the book of Galatians. Why? Well, see again, like the movie The Wizard of Oz. Hey, we just start watching it. And you can look around and see books on my shelf. I got several thousand just in this office. Each one of these books has a title to it. Every movie that you watch has a title to it. You may remember uh, uh, an old Western called Wagon Train. Uh, uh, in each episode of Wagon Train, it would be the story of somebody. uh, that episode is going to be the story of Elizabeth Lewis, the story of Angela Morgan, the story of Shirley Barclay, the story of Kelly Brooks, the story of Anthony Brooks, the story of Carrie Barnes, and on and on and on. Well, watch this. Each episode is entitled The Story About Somebody. Well, that's what it's called, the significance of title. From this point on, whenever you watch a movie, see what the title is. And then watch this, find out the significance of the title. See, when we open up the Bible, as I will show you in the book of Galatians, Galatians, like all of the other epistles, are called, watch this, you'll see it in the weeks to come, occasional documents. That's what we call them in the academy, occasional documents, which means this: something has occasioned the writing. Somebody has said something, somebody didn't understand something, somebody has done something contrary to the way and to the will and the word of God. And the apostles and Bible writers are writing as a corrective. And in most of their writings, they're responding to something. In other words, something has occasioned the writing. And that's what we're going to see in the weeks to come in the book of Galatians. I will tell you right now, and I hope you will just go and read the first two chapters, because Paul comes out with guns a-blazing. I mean, Paul comes out, I will tell you, he be mad. He be real mad. Paul got the gloves on. Well, why? Well, that's what we're going to see in the weeks to come. And I hope you will join us in this study as we read through and study the book of Galatians. Until then, may the Lord of the harvest bless you, and may he bless you real good.